Letil, moral hardening, late remorse, and the slow awakening of consciousness. The testimony of the Spirit. Letil, presented in the second part of Heaven and Hell, describes a spiritual state marked by moral hardening built during life, followed by a late remorse that arises when the conscience can no longer hide behind justifications. It is a narrative that highlights how the insensitivity cultivated over time does not eliminate responsibility. It merely postpones the confrontation with one's own truth. Letil manifests with intellectual clarity and preserved memory, but demonstrates profound moral suffering. In life, his attitudes were characterized by indifference to others, rigidity of feelings, and little openness to empathy. It was not necessarily about spectacular acts of violence, but rather a continuous posture of coldness, selfishness, and contempt for the human consequences of his choices. After passing, this posture loses its support. Modern depth psychology helps to understand this state. Emotional hardening is often a defense mechanism against vulnerability and emotional responsibility. When the individual shuts themselves off from the feelings of others, they also distance themselves from their own feelings. On the spiritual plane, where defenses weaken, this armor breaks, and the repressed emotional content emerges as intense moral pain. Spiritism clarifies that Letil's suffering is not arbitrary punishment, but a natural effect of the expansion of consciousness in light of the law of cause and effect. Upon clearly perceiving the impact of their coldness on other consciousnesses, remorse arises. This remorse is not punishment. It is a sign that the consciousness has finally begun to awaken to values it previously disregarded. Modern science reinforces this reading by demonstrating that empathy is a capacity that can be atrophied or developed. When neglected, it generates deep difficulties in relationships and internal balance. On the spiritual level, the absence of empathy transforms into suffering proportional to the degree of lucidity achieved as consciousness begins to feel what it previously ignored. Another striking point in Letil's testimony is the slowness of repentance. He does not rebel, but he also does not find immediate relief. The suffering persists because consciousness is still learning to feel. This process is gradual, requiring time, reflection, and spiritual assistance. Spiritism shows that not all awakenings are sudden. Some are built step by step. Spiritism teaches that this state is not definitive. As Letil accepts to develop sensitivity, recognize the value of others, and desire to repair internally, suffering begins to fulfill its educational function. Spiritual justice does not seek to humiliate, but to teach what material life could not awaken. This testimony brings a current and important alert. In a society that often normalizes indifference, emotional coldness, and extreme individualism, Letil's account reminds us that not feeling is not moral neutrality. The absence of empathy also builds consequences, even if silent. Letil teaches us that consciousness cannot be anesthetized forever. What is ignored in life returns as inevitable learning. Developing empathy, sensitivity, and responsibility now is not weakness, it is preventive wisdom. Reflecting on this account is an invitation to humanize relationships in the present. Listening more, judging less, and considering the impact of our actions today is the safest way to avoid long processes of pain later. Awareness grows when it learns to feel. If this testimony helped you reflect on empathy, responsibility, and moral maturity, like, share, and leave your comment. Your participation helps this message reach more people.